Thanks, John. Yeah. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes for a power talk, so we will be quick like lightning. The goal is to kind of leave here with everybody having a GED in eSports. Certainly Rick and Brandon did a great job of kind of talking about the industry. I'm going to try to do the flyby 50,000 foot level and get everybody up to speed on what's going on in this amazing industry. So let's start with defining our terms, right? Esports is the competitive video gaming industry. Think sports, but instead of basketball or football, you're playing League of Legends or Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So basic literacy on this, right? I think one of the biggest misnomers when I ask people if they know about esports, they go, oh yeah, you mean like FIFA and Madden? And the answer is really no. I mean, some of those games do have esports ecosystems, right, where there's a competitive spectator sport around the game. But the most popular video games and the most popular esports in the world are not sports-based video games. They're League of Legends, right, which is the game that Riot Games, Brandon Beck's company, makes. This is a completely free-to-play game. They have more than 100 million monthly active users, and they did close to $2 billion in revenue last year for a free-to-play game. Counter-Strike Global Offensive is the second most popular esport in the world. It's actually made locally by Valve. And these games are the sports of the future. And one thing that I think is really important to unpack at the outset, right? The stereotype around who is a gamer, it's not dying, it's already dead, right? There's a growing body of research that shows that my mom lied to me growing up, that video games do not, in fact, rot your brain, that they are incredibly beneficial from an educational perspective. Gamers work better in teams. They're creative problem solvers. They've been conditioned to believe when they fail at something 100 times to try for the 101st time to be able to succeed, and those results have absolutely borne out in the classroom. I'm not saying that you should have your kids inside playing video games for 12 hours a day, but you also probably shouldn't be banning them from doing this either. Continuing on our trip of literacy, we have the game publishers, right? These are the people who are making, developing, publishing the games, the most popular video games in the world. Some of these titles should look pretty familiar, right? You have Valve, which is based out of Bellevue, you have Microsoft, which is here as well, and then the major giants of this industry, Riot Games and Blizzard. So Rick Fox had a really good quote earlier today that I will absolutely steal for future use, which is that esports is evolving in doggy years, right? 1 year in esports is basically 7 years in the real world. This is a quote from Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, talking about the opportunity in the esports space right now. And he's absolutely right. When you think about esports, you have to remember how nascent this ecosystem really is, right? You're talking about a world in which in 2011, this was the World Championships, right? This is the most popular game in the world, the League of Legends World Championships, and it's basically 5 kids on laptops against 5 kids on laptops playing in their basement with a dozen people watching. This is the same World Championship last year. It's a sold-out LA Staples Center. You have Zed playing the pre-show concert. This venue sold out in under 5 minutes. It's hard to overstate the popularity of esports in 2016, and we're just getting going. But look, we talked a lot about League of Legends. We had Brandon up here earlier today. It's easy to think it's just a League of Legends thing, and it's really not. This is a sold-out NHL arena in Columbus, Ohio last year for a Counter-Strike event. This is sold-out Key Arena last year for the International, which is a big Dota 2 event. And as a lifelong, still to this day, may they rest in peace, Sonics fan, I think it's safe to say you don't see Key Arena this packed very often anymore. And you know, it's unbelievable. This event is 6 days long. It sells out Key Arena all 6 days. It has for the last several years, and it will continue to do so in the future. But it's very easy for me to put up stadium images and say, oh, look how big esports is, because you guys sit there and you think, wow, you found the 100,000 people who are crazy enough to fill out venues in Columbus, Ohio, and Seattle, Washington, and LA, but like that's it, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, not quite. So these are viewership numbers around the final game of major sporting events of the last year. I have to note at the outset, and this is really important, these are apples to oranges comparisons, right? You don't measure TV viewership and digital viewership the same way, and I think that's something that gets lost in translation a lot. And when you have these articles that say there were more viewers of the League of Legends World Championships than there were of the NBA Finals, that's not really true. But when I look at this slide, I try to go from a way broader perspective, okay? 42 million people or 43 million people tuned in to watch the League of Legends World Championship Finals in 2016. Pick an arbitrary age. Everyone 32 years or younger grew up in a world where video games were relatively accessible and cheap. Fast forward 50 years from now, and basically everyone will have grown up in that world. I don't need to convert people who are over 35 and esports fans, although we are doing that every day. The reality is esports fans are being born. And this is in contrast to traditional sports where the median age of a baseball fan is 53, the median age of an NFL fan is 47, the median age of an NBA fan is 37. 55% of the audience of these sports are between the ages of 21 and 35. Right? This is a extremely young and growing demographic. And so I don't really care whether or not this is an apples to oranges comparison, and I don't really care what's bigger right now, because in 50 years, whatever the most popular video game is, and it's probably not going to be League of Legends, but whatever it is, it's going to be as ubiquitous as soccer. That is the market potential for this industry. So let's look at what's going on economically in the industry right now. Major acquisitions are happening. We talked a little bit about Twitch earlier, and I want to get to that in a little bit as I close the talk by talking about the intersection of esports and technology. But you've had major investments from publishers to broadcasting platforms to leagues to teams. Suffice it to say, big money is pouring into this space. It is, along with VR, kind of one of the big investment buzzwords. It's garnering major attention from mainstream brands like Coca-Cola, Geico, Bud Light, right? And you ask why? Well, the audience is young, which is great and is becoming increasingly hard to reach because we don't consume traditional media, right? We don't subscribe to cable. We're not so much cord cutters as we are cord nevers. We don't consume print media, certainly, right? And so how do you reach them? You reach them where they are. You reach them in a way that's compelling. And that's why they're going after this demographic. It's a surprisingly lucrative demographic. Average household income is $76,000 a year. And it's also a surprisingly growing demographic. In the West alone, the esports fan base grew by 76% last year, from 2015 to 2016. And so while you've seen the big brands pour in, you've also seen the world of traditional sports begin to align, right? You have Rick's picture up there. He was one of the early adopters in this space, to be sure, in founding an esports team over 2 years ago. You've also seen the likes of Peter Guber, the owner of the Dodgers and the Warriors, Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Wizards and the Capitals. You have Rob Moore, the former vice chairman of Paramount. You have the Boston Bruins and the Miami Heat that have bought in. You have the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, Wes Edens. And we could go on and on. I mean, these are really just the highlights here. Suffice it to say, people from the traditional sports space are starting to take notice of esports, and they're buying in. So this is a sports tech conference, and though my job today was to give you kind of the 50,000-foot view of what's going on in my industry, I want to make sure that we end with something that's directly pertinent. So let's talk about the merger of esports and tech. In some ways, this is fairly obvious, right? I mean, esports are tech, and we're games. Like we're not so much figuring out how to integrate technology into our ecosystem as we were born with it. But I think there's some really important lessons here for traditional sports to draw on, and I want to make sure we talk about those. And I'd say the biggest theme here is that esports weren't born in stadiums the way that traditional sports were, right? We were born in an era of engaging with people from their couch. And while the stadium experience is absolutely compelling, I think we do a better job in general than traditional sports does of engaging a viewer who is watching from home. And there are a number of ways that we do that, right? We don't just give you a second screen and have extra stats. We give you a way to interact with the game. So whether that's a running fan vote on Twitter, so that they will put up on screen about what the fans that are watching in real time, who they think is going to win, or if it's even impacting the game in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. It's a little hard to see, but it's a mobile game called Clash Royale. They have a cheering function in the game, and based on how many people are engaging with a particular team or another, they will actually have confetti going in the game while the players are playing, which means you can see in real time as you're playing the game, right, that people are rooting for you or rooting for your opponent. VR is going to pioneer traditional sports, and it will start with esports. We don't have a capture problem. Everything in esports is data. You don't have to figure out how to get this footage. We can put you in the game, and we already are. And perhaps the biggest innovation here is Twitch. And there's a number of important things you have to know about Twitch. Let's start with what it is, right? It's an online streaming platform that was acquired by Amazon. It primarily uses gaming content. Rick was talking a little bit earlier today about breaking down the barriers between the athlete and the fan, and Twitch is the #1 way esports do that. So he was talking about his players practicing. I want to break it down in terms we can all understand. Imagine LeBron James goes to play pickup basketball, and he straps a GoPro to his chest. He plays basketball against a bunch of other NBA players, and he commentates on what he's doing and why he's doing it. He's practicing his lefty hook shots today, and so he's thinking about his footwork. He's thinking about how he sets up his man in order to create the space for the shot. He's also reading comments from his fans and interacting with them, and they're getting a real-world glimpse into how he hangs out, what he likes and doesn't like. That happens in esports every day. If you were to go on the Twitch app right now, click on League of Legends, you would find a streamer who is broadcasting themselves live to 25,000, 30,000 people right now. And another really important aspect of this is Twitch chat, right? It's creating a meaningful interaction moment between fans in real time. And I think this is something you kind of have to see to figure out exactly what this is.
Things up. The TSM, they're scared about this.
So you have the gameplay on the left and you have the chat on the right side of the screen.
Hoping to catch somebody peek on Envy's side. And well, that's what happens when you go around the corner. Happy with one dig. Oh, and another one! Oh, and a third! Happy!
Watch what's happening on that chat. As Happy is getting what will ultimately become 5 kills in a row in a pivotal moment in a pivotal match, chat explodes. It's the digital version of being in the stadium and seeing the fans go ballistic.
I think I just broke my chair. I might need a new one.
Pretty crazy, right? And if you've never been to an esports event, even if you think this is not your thing, even if you don't care, even if you hate video games, you have to go, if only for 20 minutes. I've taken so many people that have never watched esports before. You won't get what's going on the screen. That won't matter. You'll hear the color commentary and the play-by-play commentary. You'll see the instant replay analysis. You'll hear the fans screaming around you. You will see the pre-match commentary and the in-between games commentary. You'll see the merchandise everywhere, and you'll think, this is traditional sports. They're just playing video games. Thanks.